Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves. This one was actually pretty good. The Sly series has been just a kind of a weird, interesting series that I can't quite place my finger on as to its popular with a certain group of people and not overall popular with the rest of the PlayStation crowd. I don't know, I feel it fits in a weird in-between state where it appeals to a very certain demographic, but the games have turned out to be very good, and some the last one wasn't so great. This one kind of hit a nice balance, and there's a really big change that they did in this game that I found was really interesting, is that in the main overworlds now, again, it's a lot more streamlined, but there are no more collectibles. I was kind of going through the first level in Venice, kind of going around, and I realized, oh, they removed all the bottles, so there's no more collectibles, and that's both a good and a bad thing, wherein it's good that it streamlines the experience so you're not constantly double checking and searching, but now that whole element of discovery and exploration are completely absent from the game. And the other big shift and tone change in this game is there's a lot more emphasis on storytelling and cinematics and characters. And again, that's fine if you have really good character cinematics and story to unfold. And the Sly Cooper stories, they're fine, but they're kind of, not exactly the most intellectually or thrilling. It's very kind of low-key Saturday morning cartoon energy. And to kind of make that as the prime focus of your game rather than the actual gameplay kind of feels not like the best move. And I would say that the first half of the game, the stories feel, I don't know how else to describe it, but like DLC-ish stories. Like, these are recycled ideas that they wanted in the last game, they put in this one. And they're just not that interesting in the first half. In the second half, I think they get much better and much more engaging. Another thing that I also noticed about this game is that there's a lot of gimmick mechanics. Now, in the previous games, it was very kind of expected what kind of moves and whatever you would do in a certain level. It was very much the same thing, and it's just the levels that changed. And this one, it's a whole series of gimmick mechanics that make it feel almost like a WarioWare game. And a lot of these things, they're not poorly programmed. I mean, there's a little kind of airplane shooting level. There's one where you have to take a truck and flip it on a bunch of scorpions. There's one where we have to climb a character like Shadow of the Colossus. There's a lot of very impressive mechanics in this game, and that also kind of reflects the philosophy of this one too. So again, because the story, I wish the story was better because they put so much emphasis into it, and there's just so many cutscenes, and it just made me remember this era of gaming where they started to take more gameplay away from the player. It was less immediate, and it was more about storytelling. And again, Sly, it's not bad. It's more of a vibe kind of game, but storytelling in Sly it's not really the main focal point. So it's a little bit jarring to have that switch. The other thing too, you can see kind of a shift. It's a 2005 game, and Sucker Punch, the industry was changing where you could say mascot-like games weren't as popular. Things like, Mario and Sonic. And now that game is becoming more mainstream in the 2000s, you kind of wanted to do more human character-focused games. There's kind of this shift more so to realism. And so for Sucker Punch to be perpetually as a kid-friendly series, they kind of saw, oh, there's more potential to move outside of that. And I guess sometime after this they made Infamous, which is just, again, a crazy leap. Again, I just keep gaslighting myself into thinking that these are the Uncharted Nathan Drake people, but that's Naughty Dog, which made the action platformer Jak and Daxter. It just doesn't really add up in my mind. It's just kind of funny how it all worked out, I guess. But yeah, the big one in this game is that there's a big heist they have to pull up about the Family Cooper vault, and so this is kind of all the historical characters and essentially the entire history and the loot and plunder of the Cooper gang has been left in one location. And you have this evil scientist who purchased the island legally and then is trying to drill into the vault when the only thing can unlock it is Cooper's cane. And so it's a sort of storytelling device where Cooper, he ends up showing up at the beginning of the story, but then what ends up happening is that he kind of gets captured and he's about to face his death, and it's all a flashback. And so you have this whole sequence where you're going backwards in time, going up to that point. So it's kind of like the main hook of the story, which is kind of, it's a hit or miss the way that kind of hook works. I'm very tired of it, where it's like 2 months prior. Like, I don't know, it's to me it's just so overdone. So the main thing of this one is that it's called Honor Among Thieves. So what they've done is they've taken the roster of the Cooper gang and expanded it. And so for this giant heist they want to pull off to find Cooper's historical legendary vault, they need a bit larger squad of characters. And so the entire game is actually just recounting how they grouped up a bunch of guys and brought them in. So it's kind of like an Ocean's 11 kind of vibe, where you have a bunch of guys and they each have their own story and how they were recruited, and that goes into their own kind of sub stories as well. You can tell that the team wanted to do a lot more than what they had, if that makes any sense. For example, they just have so many mechanics, so many new playstyles, so many more characters that, like, okay, we added Bentley and Murray, let's just add more characters. In a way, it almost feels like a Sonic Heroes in a way to me. And so there's a bunch of different characters you add in, and I mean, you add in, but it's kind of like an asterisk that they only appear in certain levels and certain locations. Like, you don't actually have full free control of them. It's still the main gang of Sly, Murray, and Bentley, and they operate in this semi-open world environment, again with no collectibles. So there's no incentive to explore the world. It's just there as a set piece for you to go out and interact with it. So yeah, you do fully control these new characters, but it's only for very specific missions and set pieces, which is kind of, I guess, I don't know, kind of undercutting it. I think another thing I really like is that you can control Carmelita in this game. And that was a lot of fun, because she's always been kind of the main rival. I wouldn't say antagonist, but she's the main rival, and watching her play style, and just like they actually bothered making a third person play style that actually feels somewhat decent. Like, every time I went to these mini games, it was like, oh wow, this actually is not bad. This could be a whole thing in its own. And I mean, that's both a good and a bad thing, because the one thing I did find over time is that, again, they just made so many gimmick mechanics, like oh, here's a driving thing, here's a helicopter mission, here's an airplane mission, is that with so many rotating door of revolving gameplay elements, you never really get good at one specific element. It's only there for like a few minutes, and then once it's over, you move on to the next one. And for some people, maybe that's nice to have that variety, but because they almost never reappear, it feels a little bit frustrating in a way. Especially near the end of the game, where they just have to make it very difficult. There are some challenges that are just stupidly hard that it doesn't even make sense. I do have to say, though, I kind of like the new cast of characters. There's a couple that are completely new characters, and then there's a couple that are actually returning characters that join your team, which I found to be pretty interesting. Again, I just feel it's a pretty weak intro with Venice and the opening levels, just because, again, it doesn't feel like there's any real stakes. Like, for example, the first level is that Murray has gone out east to essentially become a student of this guru, and so he's in Venice, or you bring him to Venice, and you basically have to recruit him back into the gang. And the way you do that is by taking down this local mafia boss who's an opera singer, and you end up basically like stopping a bunch of pollution plans he has. And Maria has this whole environmentalist thing going on, so it kind of works with that. But it's such a like a low risk kind of boring situation, despite the intro. I mean, it's just, I don't know, it just does not grab you. But the later levels, I think the China level was really, really great. Nice, small, isolated story. I would say the peak of this game actually was the boss fight with General Zhao, because you're in this forest, and I'm used to like these general boss fights where you have to hit at the right time, then retreat. But what I really liked about it is that all the bamboo stalks were destructible. So as you hit the boss, it actually destroyed the environment. It really added, I think, a lot more than than you'd think. It felt like you were actually having this big epic battle where the environment is getting destroyed around you. The other big thing that I do have to say is that, again, there's a lot of mechanics that are kind of repeatable and whatever, and they just kind of exist for one moment. But something that was actually really surprisingly fun was the pirate game, the pirate mini game, where you sail a ship around the ocean and you broadside people. And I am, kind of sick to death with this sort of subgenre, like you had it in Assassin's Creed 4, you had it in, Sea of Thieves, and I would say it does it better than Sea of Thieves, and it makes it a single player experience. And it's actually really ingenious, where you walk around completely on the ship, but your L2 and R2 buttons that would usually be mapped to a special move are now to turn the ship, and then you have to go up to one side of the ship to one cannon, and that'll fire all the cannons on that side with the circle button. And so you would have a whole strategy. So you're in full control. You're turning, you're firing. It feels really good. And honestly, this pirate level at the end of Sly 3, I would say, works better than Black Flag and Skull and Bones and all of these, imitation pirate games. This one, the simplest version of it, I think works the best. And it is super simple. And what I love about it, it's super repeatable, and it's kind of encouraged as the real way to 100% the game or kind of do completion, because you essentially just get so much money from privateering that it makes you feel like a real pirate. Like, it's the last level of the game, and there's a bunch of moves that, again, you don't really need to complete the game, but I think they count towards 100% completion. And so all of these moves, essentially, they're very expensive. I was shocked. In the course of playing the whole game, unless you're pickpocketing all the time, you're gonna unlock maybe like a third, if that, maybe a quarter of all the skills you need. And the other 75% of the game at the end of the other 75% of the moves at the end of the game, the only most efficient way to do it is through pirating, which is, I think is very appropriate. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. And of course, it has this whole mechanic where, you can destroy a ship and sink it, or at the last ship, you can decide to board it, and then you just have to do a little land battle, take out the captain, and then you get an extra bonus on top of that. And it's, a couple hundred, it's up to like 500 coins per siege. And so it's a lot of fun. And again, it's very straightforward. It's not complicated. I honestly almost had more fun with that last pirate level than a lot of other parts of the rest of the game. I'm glad I kept playing through it. Again, that's another thing that's new. Now guards will have, pickpocket items, and now they'll have specific, values attached to them. So you don't have to go back to the safe house and sell everything on the dark net. It's just immediately converted into coins, and so you can buy stuff on the computer. Again, there's some interesting characterization. I really like the new character Penelope, and so she has a whole arc where she's initially really attracted to Sly, and Bentley kind of has to win her over because they're both very nerdy, and you kind of think, oh, well, they belong together, but then Bentley has to kind of go out of his way to prove it, essentially. And I guess on that note, in terms of characters and relationships, the ending to this game is really, really good. I was kind of wondering, this is kind of the unofficial ending. I know there's a Sly 4, but this kind of felt like a trilogy. It's kind of like the end of, this one line of games, the end of a series. And the ending was it was so good because it got me, where even as the viewer, there's a twist at the end where Sly basically fakes having memory loss, and in the end he gets what he wants. He finally has this come to God moment where he realizes at the beginning of the game, where he's had his near-death experience, that he has to wonder and truly ask what is truly important in life: his legacy, his riches, his gang, his friends, his reputation, or the woman that he truly wants to be with. And so just the way the game ends, it was actually, honestly, okay. I was kind of wondering, this game isn't really that great. It's kind of like whatever. You have a bunch of kind of C-tier bosses, as it felt like in the beginning of the game. But that ending honestly made it so worth it. It was a great ending. And again, it was just a ton of fun. And yeah, it kind of wraps up the series very nicely. And it kind of leads one to question, what happened to the rest of the series. I know there's obviously Sly 4, which I think let's say like a mixed kind of review kind of thing. There's some interesting aspects to that game. I think one thing I just might mention on Carmelita very quickly is, I'm fine with free games. There's kind of an inherent energy there, kind of an inherent creativity, but also an inherent And I think the internet has impacted this a lot. But there's just the second level when you're in Australia. The end boss of that level is that Carmelita puts on this mask that's been possessing people, and so it turns her into a giant version of herself, and she gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you have to climb her like Shadow of the Colossus. And it's actually a very short sequence, and it's fine, but it's just kind of like like, I know. The other thing that maybe I've just ruined, but the entire time, they said that, we have to get rid of these miners because it's a mining operation. So these miners are causing trouble. We have to defeat the miners. We have to destroy the miners. I think the internet and its culture currently has just like ruined a lot of things and a lot of terms. But yeah, that whole sequence I found was very funny. Again, Sly's moves are pretty much the same, remain unchanged. There is a new kind of combo attack feature now where if you press triangle during combat, instead of doing the 1-up unless you're in stealth mode, it will now kind of make the cane glow, and then depending on the next button you press, it'll do a special attack, which is kind of cool. Also, Bentley has a bunch of new gadgets, and one main thing is this kind of remote grapple thing where you have to send... It's basically a security camera, but it can go around the map, and it gets really upgraded. You can tell, again, like, there is so much creativity in the different mechanics. This game has so many mechanics that I can guarantee you can go through the game without basically missing a few, and some of them only exist for like a few minutes and then it's over. Again, the one thing throughout this series that I honestly didn't like is I think Murray's arc. I don't know, I just didn't like his character as it went on. He just became more angrier and kind of like egomaniacal. He just doesn't seem like a character that would work well in a group. He seems more like a guy who's in a solo kind of vibe compared to his first two iterations. The other thing I do have to say about this game is it was, I believe, significantly shorter than the previous one. I think it was like 18 hours. This one was about 10 hours, which was much better. It was 6 episodes, and even the last episode is kind of like a shorter one. So yeah, this is around a 10-hour game, which is much more manageable, and it's just a little bit more digestible for sure. And of course they were smart to not do the repeating the same enemy over and over again throughout whatever. But again, it was just there's a rowboat mechanic. There's just so many mechanics and so many chapters in this game that it just goes by so quickly. And the other thing that was a bit misleading is that by the end of the game I had 52% completion. So I was like, oh, okay. I thought, oh, this is going to be the same length as the previous game. And the reason that wasn't the case is that, again, like Sly has always had a weird relationship with 100% and what that should be. In the first game, you could beat it with 70%, and it was just time trials. In the second game, I believe it was just getting all the bottles, which was really not hard at all, so it was very easy to 100% that. In this game, however, in order to 100% it, like half the thing are challenges, and it's not, so it's similar to Sly 1 where you have to do time challenges, but then it's specific things like, oh, beat this mission in a time limit or do this thing without being hit, and they just kind of feel like achievement farming kind of challenges. They're not exactly very fun, and I literally have no interest in doing them. In fact, there's some mini games that just feel kind of broken, like the Venetian boat chase was very frustrating because you have this turret on a boat and you're basically dodging a bunch of other boats, and I thought it was an endurance thing that you're supposed to be dodging a lot of these obstacles so you die very quickly if you just keep hitting things and your iframes don't really exist, and you're just holding down the fire button and letting it go and then waiting for it to cool down to restart like most games. But apparently the correct procedure is to basically mash the square button, because that's the real way that you actually fire without it overheating in these weird bursts. And then I just did like 3 times more damage, and it just didn't translate to tapping the button is way more. I mean, they did say that, but it's still, the visual cues don't reinforce it at all. Again, another thing that was just really, really strange and interesting about this game is, so, you know, I bought it off, you know, eBay in its original packaging, and in the instruction booklet, it has this pair of 3D glasses. So there are like 10% of the levels in this game that you can play in 3D, apparently. And of course, the glasses unfortunately didn't come with the game, but they were, you know, the cutouts were there, and I was kind of like, what is this? And, you know, you go into a level and it's like, hey, Sly, you might need to use your special goggles for this one. And thank God it gives you the option to play it in 3D or not. Because if you do play it in 3D without the 3D glasses, it looks very, very jarring. It has that blue, you know, the blue-red shift with a bunch of gray in between. And I guess that's kind of cool. I've never, ever seen another game ever do that. I mean, the whole 3DS was sold on that platform, on that idea, but it was such a gimmick. No one really used it. No one really cared. It was really just a way for most people to play DS games they missed out on, frankly. But that's like a hardware thing. This is a software thing. So it's very odd to see that. And yeah, as I said, thank God, it gives you an option at the beginning to just not play it in that mode if you don't want to, which is, again, very jarring on the eyes. It does also lead into this idea that they wanted to expand Sly Cooper beyond games and go into the cinematic world. I remember the mid-2000s was a very, how do I say, a time wherein you were game companies and media companies were very much focusing on making games feel more like movies, saying, oh, we have 1 million characters on screen, we have real life, you know, photorealistic graphics and all this stuff. And so it does make sense for a natural transition for Sly Cooper in that era to try to become a movie. And in fact, there was a Sly Cooper movie planned for 2016 apparently, and like, they had a trailer. It looked pretty decent. It looked all right. Murray looked a bit weird, but it's like, okay, you know, this could definitely work. And then apparently it was canceled. So, you know, unfortunately, the industry and costs and things. I mean, it's funny, we had a Ratchet and Clank movie. I would love to see a Sly Cooper movie, because I do feel the characters, the story, the kind of vibe of it, I think it would be marginally successful. And that's kind of how I feel at the end of this Sly trilogy. They're not the greatest games out there, but they are very decent and very fun, and they're not you know, anything I would say trophy worthy, but you know, they stand as this one niche, and it stands as this one niche in the gaming area that, you know, this is actually pretty decent, and it did some really interesting things, especially mechanically. Like, just the shipbuilding or the ship fighting thing alone is, I think, something worth looking into. And just the fact this kind of game even exists, and, you know, the level of quality into it is still, you know, very impressive. It just kind of got bogged down where they had all these mechanics, all these new characters, and they're like, we're not really sure what direction to go in. Anyway, I might try Sly 4, but I was actually pretty satisfied for this to be the ending of the series. I do think it was also funny that the very first level of this game was Venice, when I already compared this game to Assassin's Creed, or the previous one to Assassin's Creed. So yeah, I don't know, Sucker Punch, great studio, Sly is a great series, and I'm kind of glad I played it. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for this one. I'll see you later. Bye.